up next here on Channel 17, New York Lawn and Garden.
New York Lawn and Garden is made possible through the generosity of the WXXI Associates.
Patrick Berry House. As you can see, it's a beautiful historic house here in right off Mount Hope Boulevard. If you're familiar with Rochester, Patrick Berry is a very important person. Right across the street is the L. Wanger Gardens. And as you can see, the people are walking around the grounds. Today is a very special day. It is the Friends Garden Tour here at the Patrick Berry House, a benefit affair for the Friends. And here we are live, and we have an audience, which is in a way unusual. So hi, folks. How are you today? And joining me today, as usual on the program, well, actually, before I get to the people on the program, just a reminder, as usual, we have our program. You can make your phone, your calls at the number you see on the screen or at the 1-800 number. And again, feel free to call because that is one of the reasons why we're here is to answer your questions. Now, helping me to answer those questions today are Wally Smith of Village Garden Store, Mike Tanzini of Ted Collins Tree and Landscape. Out in our outfield area, we have Greg Frank of Ted Collins Tree and Landscape. Hi, Greg. How are you today? And joining us for the very first time is Susan Maney O'Leary. Now, Susan is with the George Eastman House, and she's I guess, the horticultural curator over the George Eastman House, and just got married this morning, so we want to wish her a happy day. She'd called yesterday to find out if her boyfriend could join us on the program or be here today, and I said certainly. When she came today, she said, I'd like to introduce my husband. So it's a big change overnight, but welcome to the program, Susan. And as usual, we like to begin our program by checking with our mailbag, and we've received a number of letters. And Wally, you have the first letter, I believe.
Yes, Mrs. Jean Baker wrote a letter about her boxwood, and they're yellowing. And she wanted to know why. She's been growing them for 3 years now, and her plants are yellowing this spring, and she checked the soil, and the pH was 4.5, which is very acidic. So the last 2-3 years, she's been putting hydrated lime down. That's kind of a hot lime. You use that in making Portland cement and that sort of thing. It's really not for plants. If she were to lower the pH again, try to get it down there, or raise the pH, excuse me, I would use a dolomitic limestone. It isn't as hot. It has nutrients, has magnesium. She said it's up to 6 right now, which for boxwood, 6 is pretty good. And if she wanted to change the pH a little bit to raise it, she said she was told it between 6 to 8, but I think it's 5 to 6. Instead of using hydrated lime or even dolomitic lime, you can use certain mulches, like hardwood shredded mulch. When they break down, they raise the pH level. So use a mulch, and don't use any more lime because she's limed it enough.
All right, she's almost limed it to death.
Really?
Okay. Another thing we'd like to point out too, because we do have an audience today when we get to a little later in the program. If you have questions, just let the floor manager know. He's the guy running around sweating. But let him know, and he'll get a microphone to you. Our next time we're going to go over to our next letter, we'll go over to Susan Maney. I think if Susan is set up, we will go over to Susan. She has a letter from a viewer who has a couple questions. Susan?
Thanks, Jack. I have a letter from Frank Velti of Rochester, New York, and he has a couple of questions for us, and I think I can answer one for him. This one is, I've been defeated by the common slug. Every year they eat my marigolds to the stalk and do not allow new growth, which results in the plant's death. I've tried several of the insecticides on the plants and have used over $40 worth of ortho snail and bug killer this year alone. Now, Slugs are a really bad problem, particularly when we've had these wet springs. Instead of using insecticides, which haven't seemed to work, I would suggest some of the organic controls. One of them is to put shallow trays of beer in your garden. Sink the tray like a pie pan right to ground level, and what happens is the slugs will crawl in there and they'll drown. They'll enjoy their feast before they drown. There's also these little plastic traps that will hold the beer and keep it clean. The other solution that I found for trapping slugs and getting rid of them out of your garden is to lay a board down near the edge of your garden, and you'll find in the morning that they're collected there. So try those two organic controls and see what we can come up with. That question's from Frank Velti on Dunn Street in Rochester, New York. Back to you, Jack.
All right, thanks, Susan. And what we're going to do right now is, if you happen to have a question you would like to write us a letter, we're going to take a moment right now and show you where you can send letters.
Send us a sample of your problem with your name, address, and brief description of your gardening problem to New York Lawn and Garden, Post Office Box 21, Rochester, New York 14601. Or bring your sample to our studio at 280 State Street. Please have your sample wrapped in paper towels to protect its freshness. By the way, if you have a plant or garden that you're proud of, send us a color photograph or slide, and we'll be happy to put that on the air, too.
Okay, we are back. Again, we are here today live at the Patrick Berry House as part of the WXXI Friends Garden Tour. And if you happen to live in Rochester and you have some find some time in the afternoon free, come on down. It's a very special day. You'll be able to tour the Patrick Berry House. Also go over to the Ellwanger Gardens. You have a chance to talk with some of the folks here at WXXI's New York Lawn and Garden. And just basically have a good afternoon. It's an interesting day. It goes in and out of being sunny and being wet. But it's still, I think it's going to be a good day. You know, it's a positive energy to make it a beautiful day, and it's going to be that way for the next hour. That's at least we keep telling ourselves. All right, we're going to go to our phone calls right now, and our first caller is from Rochester. Hello, you're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, how are you today?
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No.
Oh. Well, what's
Should I
your
turn up
question?
the TV?
Turn your TV down and then just listen over the phone.
I still can't hear you.
Okay, how about a question? Question?
I'm going to have to turn the TV up.
Okay, turn the TV up.
Okay.
Turn it up. Okay, you got a question for us?
Yes.
Okay.
I just started a garden in front of my window in an apartment building. And I planted flowers, but I had so many that I planted them all together. And I'm wondering, when they come up, will they be suffocating each other because they're probably too close together?
So they're going to be crowding each other out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to address that, Jack. It sounds as if you started them from seed, and when they do emerge, you are going to have to thin the plants out and space them. And usually on a seed packet, it'll give you advice about spacing of the flowers. You'll start sowing them thicker and then have to thin them to so many inches apart. If you do have your seed packets, refer to them. Otherwise, try to give the plants at least 3 to 4 inches of individual space. It hurts a little to pull the little guys out the first time, but don't worry about it because the results will really be much better if you thin.
Okay.
So she has overcrowded just as they come up. Pull the little leaves when they hit their second leaf on the thing.
As soon as you can actually get a hold of them with your fingers.
All right, an easy way of thinning things out. And speaking of thinning things out, right about now we happen to have a situation because of the, I guess, the climate and time of the year that pests begin making their way into your garden and begin making an appearance and begin thinning out your garden. I think one of the things we've seen right now has been the gypsy moth. You want to talk about that for a moment? I know, Wally, it's a particular thing for you.
Well, out in Menden, where my store is, there's a lot of big trees out there, and the gypsy moth caterpillars are just climbing all through them and going crazy, and there's traps out there to buy, lures that they're attracted to, little boxes, and then they're killed that way, a good organic way, because sometimes spraying them, you just spray them and there's 1,000 more, and in certain forests and woods, you can actually hear them munching. I think we had a bad time about 5 years ago. You could just hear them just chewing. How about over where you are, Mike?
Well, what's happening is that we're seeing the caterpillars crawling up and down the tree trunks. They're starting to get large, as much as 2 inches long. You can tell a gypsy moth caterpillar, they're slate gray, and they have a series of red dots and blue dots in parallel lines on their back.
They're usually kind of lethargic at this time of year, and they're looking for a place to make a pupal case. So they look for furrows in the bark. They'll crawl under ledges on houses or under shingles. And the next thing that happens is they turn into a pupae, which is a resting stage, and then they'll emerge as a moth in about 30 days. The females are white, the males are brownish, the females don't fly, the males do fly. And they'll lay a buff-colored egg case, which is about 1.5 inches long by 3/4 wide, and you want to search and destroy those. And that'll help to reduce the volume of caterpillars by about 500 for next spring.
Okay. All right, we're going to go back to our phones right now. Our next caller is again from Rochester. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
What can we do for you?
I'm calling about some Wazilia bushes, I think that's how it's pronounced. And they've been cut back, I think a little bit too much. Will they come back again?
Yeah.
They're very woody at this point.
Yeah, Wazilia are a very beautiful bush, but they have a problem when they first come out in the spring. They're very woody. You have to cut them way back, in some cases 12, 18 inches. And now they're starting to grow. There's a variety called Red Java that's finished blooming. That's a pink flower with a reddish leaf. There's the regular red flowering one. There's the one with variegated leaves and has pink flowers. And now they're blooming, and they're about finished blooming, the variegated ones with the pink flowers. And the new growth, they just grow tremendously, 1 foot, 18 inches. And you can keep them pruned down, just shear them down into a nice little round mound, and they'll look a lot better for the fall and next spring. And it wouldn't hurt to fertilize them. Now's a good time to fertilize them with a high phosphorus fertilizer like a Miracle Grow 1530-15 fertilizer or 510-5, just to keep the strength of the stems up, because they're making buds for next year after they finish flowering.
Okay. All right, we are going to take a moment before we go to our next phone call. We're going to take a moment and check in with Greg Frank, who's sort of been wandering the grounds and I think checking out the historic trees here on the grounds of the Patrick Berry House. Greg, are you there?
Yeah, Jack, I am. Thank you. We've been walking around the grounds here, and I'll tell you, it's just fantastic. Right behind me, you'll see a big, beautiful copper beech tree. And this copper beech, in my opinion, has to be well over 200 years old. And for someone to think back 200 years ago to plant a tree like this, just the foresight is just stupendous. And we've got, oh, Jack, just a bunch of beautiful things. And what we'll do is go back to you, and we're going to take another little jaunt and show you a few more trees.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. Again, we're looking right now. The sun is coming out again. The humidity level is starting to creep up a little bit, but it's still a beautiful day, and we're glad everyone can be here. And if you happen to be home, as I said earlier, come on down. Be part of what's going on here at the Patrick Berry House. We're going to go to our next phone call, who is from Rochester. Hello, you're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Hi there. Are you there? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you over the phone,
okay.
But I'm listening, I can hear you on television.
Okay.
So I am having a terrible problem with chipmunks. We've lived here for 25 years, and we have lived very compatibly, but now I'm ready to kill them. They have totally eaten all our strawberries, didn't even wait for them to get green, and now they're going after all my bulbs. I mean, I go out every day, and I'm covering up 10 and 12 holes. They're eating all my tulips and all my stuff. What can I do?
They are hungry little critters, and
I had some experience with that. At one time, we've always had a cat at home, and one time we didn't for a while, and the chipmunk population really got up there, and they were taking over the yard. So what we did was we got another cat, and it really makes a difference. There's still a few around, but the cats are a good control, natural control for chipmunks.
if anything else scares them away.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Or you have a...
But they're very aggressive, and as population goes up, they'll eat just about everything you're trying to grow. They compete with you for food.
Yeah, I guess your choice is to continue to live with them.
Or not garden.
Or the other thing is or not garden. I guess there's also the traps. Do the traps work at all?
Well, to some degree, yes, you can do some trapping, but I think, you have to be persistent, monitor the traps, and it's quite a chore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they'll keep you busy.
Okay. All right, we're going to, again, go check back with Greg Frank. I believe he's, again, wandering around and finding some trees. So, Greg, are you there?
Yes, Jack, I am. As a matter of fact, Jack, this is like walking through a candy store. And right here we have a Katsura tree. And probably one of the best trees that you can plant is a lawn tree. A lot of times we'll get questions in the show about a diseased tree or an insect-infested tree. The Katsura is probably one of the few that have very little disease and insect problems. Has a beautiful compound leaf, almost heart-shaped, and a beautiful, brilliant yellow fall color. Probably one of the best and strongest shade trees that we have, and very popular. It's just unfortunately the nurserymen ought to start growing some more. But just gorgeous. And Jack, I'll tell you, I could be out here all day just hugging these trees.
Well, great. Let's not get too physical there with those trees. All right. One thing when you come by the house here, the Patrick Berry house, and you walk around the grounds, one of the things that is a beautiful focal point are the gardens here that the Mrs. Thompson, who is the, I guess, homeowner and gardener, has put in some very beautiful gardens that you kind of maybe see behind us a little bit. Well, Susan Maney is going to sort of give us a show and tell along with Mrs. Thompson of this garden. So, Susan, we're going to toss it over to you.
Thanks, Jack. I'd like to introduce Joyce Thompson, who is indeed the homeowner and the dedicated gardener who's built these gardens. Joyce, you started these gardens about 5 years ago?
Yes, this particular group of gardens is about 5 years old, as you say.
And they're perennials. It's a
perennial garden, yes.
And when I was here a few years ago, you just had the roses in, and you've added substantially, and you tell me that the gravel pathways are brand new.
Yes, something we've looked forward to for quite some time. We had Veronica in the grass, and that is a real pest. And so we decided to take out the grass completely and put in the gravel, and eventually you'll see softened edges where the creeping perennials will soften all that and be pretty.
Well, it's a nice addition. I want to point out a couple of the neat architectural features besides all the gorgeous flowers. I noticed this bench in the corner that has a backdrop of the Texas. Tell me a little bit about that bench, Joyce.
That was found in the basement. We were looking in some of the nooks and crannies down there, and we found this old bench that obviously belonged to the Barrys. Also in the same room, we found some boxes. When we opened them, wrapped in newspaper were the pedestals. There are two of them.
Where the sundials are.
That's right. And the newspaper around them was 1963.
Oh,
so someone had packed them away and forgotten all about them.
That must have been the Berry family, because it was in 63 that the university had the property.
So we have been very lucky.
Well, you have quite a combination of flowers. I noticed you have an entire planting of roses in the center. How many different varieties are in here, Joyce?
Oh, Susan.
I should have asked you that question.
You should have asked me that before. We have an enormous number.
Yes.
We add to each year. We're on the Jackson Perkins rose panel, test panel, for one thing. So every year we get 4 new test panel roses. And then I've added, we added the roses from yesteryear, the older roses. So we've got an enormous number of varieties now. We like them all. Floribundas, grandifloras, tea roses, the whole lot.
And you also have roses growing on the arbors that open the the entryways.
Yes.
Are those all climbing roses
yes,
that you've used?
Mm-hmm. We've got climbing peace and climbing golden showers.
And I also noticed a clematis planted down on one of
those
the
are brand new.
Oh, just in the ground, so they haven't started to
they
actually
haven't started yet. No, the roses at the archway at the entrance to the garden have not done very well, and we changed them a couple of times. And so just in case these two are not going to provide what we need, there are some clematis there too.
As a backup.
That's right.
Backup. Well, you've certainly done an incredible amount of work. I know that you were out here double digging this garden a few years ago when I wandered into your backyard. It's part of your English tradition. I imagine you're the only person left in Rochester who double digs her perennial borders.
No, I have a husband who does too.
Good, good. Well, we're going to wrap it up for now. Joyce, thank you for joining us, and we'll take another visit later in the show.
Pleasure.
Good to see you. Thank you. Back to you, Jack.
Okay, thanks very much, Susan. That was beautiful. And double digging the garden. It's you and I were sort of talking about just the other day. And maybe so. They are one of the last few. All right, we are here live at the Patrick Berry House. We happen to have an audience joining us today, and as a matter of fact, one of the people in the audience has a question. And so why don't you let us know what your question is, and we'll try to answer it for you.
Well, I'd like to know what's eating my plant there and what I can do about it.
Ooh, okay. What kind of plant do we have, Wally? Do you know?
It's like a...
Green thing.
Yeah, green thing. Yeah, I like these. Got to bring the tree with it or whatever. Willow branch? What is this?
No, it's a flower from my perennial garden.
See how good I am? I'm so good. It's a perennial. Okay. Something eating this. Looks like they're taking big chunks out, about as big as my end of my finger here. Can you see it on camera 3? Okay. Any caterpillars that you see there? Any bugs or anything? It's a night marauder insect that happens all the time. I would look in the litter underneath the flower, because usually what happens when a lot of insects, when they're out feeding and you don't see them, they're in the litter, because they live in the litter during the day when it's hot, and they come out at night and feed. And I don't like to just say, you know, just common shots at a chemical like 7 is always a good stomach poison to kill a beetle or a caterpillar. But we're trying to think more organically, so picking it out, there could just be 1 or 2 little caterpillars chewing on this perennial flower that looks like a willow branch.
One suggestion is to maybe look at night with a flashlight and see if you can find anything crawling around, because many of these are night feeders and they do give you a problem, but they vanish during the day.
All right, we are going to go back to our phone calls right now, and our next caller, I believe, is from Rochester, who's been hanging on patiently. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Okay.
A few months ago, we bought and planted a crimson maple tree. When we purchased the tree, the leaves were red. Now, the leaves have turned green. Wondering why this would happen.
The changing leaf.
One question I'll ask you if you're still there, is it planted in the shade of another tree or in the shade of the house?
No, not at all.
It's out in full sun?
Yes.
Okay, then more than likely it's a labeling problem. There is another maple tree called Crimson King maple, which stays red, and there's another one called Schwedler maple, which comes out red but turns green, an olive green. And what may have happened is that the tree may have been misnamed at the nursery where it was grown, and you do actually have a Schwedler maple instead of a Crimson King maple. Now, that does happen sometimes.
What to do?
See your nurseryman.
Okay, and tell him you got this advice from New York Lawn and Garden.
Yeah.
All right, while we're waiting for our next phone call to get established, we are going to go over to Greg Frank, who's been patiently waiting around and hugging another tree. Greg?
Yeah, you're right, Jack. But every good garden has to have a couple of problems. And right next to me is an Austrian pine tree. The Austrian pine has Diplodia tip blight. Diplodia tip blight, if you look right up in through here, starts at the tip of the evergreen. Matter of fact, just as the evergreen starts to send out its new growth. And that's the time that you need to put the treatment on. We get a lot of calls about, gee, what can you do now? Unfortunately, now a lot of the thing has happened. You know, there's nothing now really to do except, number one, clean up all of the leaves that have fallen, or excuse me, the needles that have fallen, and then start a good fertilizer program. If you fertilize them now, you probably could get some good food in there, build some roots up before fall time comes, and then in fall time, right around Thanksgiving, you might want to drill some holes in the ground and put a good organic dry fertilizer in. But Jack, you know, there's only one so far, and all the rest of them look so nice. So we'll go back to you.
Okay, that's great. We stopped by Mrs. Thompson's house and point out the problems. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Right now we're going to go to our audience, our live audience, to one of our faithful viewers. She told us before the show. She watches us all the time, and she's here with her mom. And your question is?
Is there anything to the theory of planting flowers at appropriate places in your vegetable garden to discourage the insects?
Mm-hmm.
For instance, one of the things I've heard about is using marigolds for that purpose.
Yes, using plants to discourage insects from flying in around your trees and shrubs is great, because I've been out in Mendon and I've seen Japanese beetles completely just cover an entire tree, and the marigolds really help. Also, using bee balm is another repellent. The herbs, there's a lot of herbs that you can use also to even, I think, garlic, and it really helps. There's a creeping thyme, which really, it has an odor and it repels. And you know, and people buy certain chemicals and they just spray it on. It doesn't help, because more Japanese beetles come all the time, like hordes of them, and it really works using the marigolds.
Right, and as you mentioned too, also the herbs. And as a matter of fact, you want some more information on the herbs, we just happen to have some because we're working on a program. So if you would like to know more about herbs and some of the flowers, drop us a line at New York Lawn and Garden. We'll drop you a little fact sheet or some information on it, because it is in a more interesting and maybe possibly a better way than always spraying your garden. And we do like to offer other chemical or non-chemical solutions. All right, we are going to check in right now. We're waiting for the next phone call. We're going to check in with Susan Maney, who's Maney O'Leary, sorry. And Susan has found something to talk about. Susan?
Thanks, Jack. I had a chance to talk with Joyce a little bit, and I have some interesting perennials that you don't commonly see in gardens that I'd like to point out. The first one is an Aramera spongii, which is this tall orange stalk. It's called the foxtail lily, and it grows from a bulb. Joyce said she didn't get a bloom the first year, but it's bloomed beautifully the second year. Standing right next to it is a perennial gloxinia, which you see, I'm going to pass in front of you here, which you see looks very much like the florist's gloxinia, and with this unusual foliage, its botanical name is Incarvalia gloxinia. So those are a couple of unusual perennials that I thought some of our viewers might be interested in seeing. Take it back to you, Jack. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Susan. We appreciate that, and we're going to go to our next caller, who is from Rochester. Hello, you're on the air.
Thank you. I have a row of cedar bushes along one side of the yard, and I've got two concerns about them. I think where the trees are not, the bushes are not getting enough sunshine, they seem to have died on one side, kind of rusty looking, if you will. And then on the other side, where there's been plenty of sun, they're really getting too tall, and I'm wondering what the proper way is to trim them back.
Okay.
Well, most of the pruning has to be done on the sunny side. On the rusty side, all you can do is remove dead wood and that type of thing, but you probably will have to shear them and lower the tops to some height that's more suitable. Sometimes with those plants, you also have to tie the interior branches together to keep them from splitting from snow weight and heavy rain, which will pull them apart. So consider going inside, taking out all the dead wood, tying the common stems together, and then shearing them, and try to bevel the face so that the hedge is thinner at the top than it is at the bottom to maintain good sunlight on the sunny side.
All right, simple enough advice.
Yeah, just you need a big ladder.
Just need. Okay, as we've been mentioning throughout the course of the program, today we are at the historic Patrick Berry House. It's all part of the WXXI Friends Garden Tour that they're holding today. And if you happen to be in the area and would like to come down and tour the house and tour the grounds, you still have some time. I think the event itself will be going on today for at least until late afternoon. And there are some beautiful trees here, some very beautiful trees, some beautiful grounds, beautiful flowers. And it's a way to support the Friends of WXXI, as well as a chance to get inside the house here at the Patrick Berry House. Right now, what we're going to do is take a moment, and we're going to show you some of the activity going on here at the Patrick Berry House, and then we'll be right back.
God, the sun would come out just from here.
On Nova. The summer of 1988 began peacefully in Yellowstone National Park. But by mid-July, the park faced the worst forest fires in more than 2 centuries. Military forces joined the firefighters, battling to control the relentless blazes. But the fires threatened to destroy the beloved landscape. Would the flames of '88 leave anything behind? That's Yellowstone's burning question, next time on Nova.
Tuesday night at 8 on Channel 17.